Hello and welcome to Lamplighter. Today is March 3. As we continue in our daily Bible reading, we continue to work our way through the very detailed law that's given from God to the nation of Israel through Moses. And we have already established the fact over and over again that God is a holy God and he desires to create for himself a holy nation of people. And so all these laws that we've been looking at over the last several days are designed to set these people apart, to make them holy, to make them righteous, so that they can be the people after his heart, the people who are his own treasured possession. Now, many of us have heard all our lives a familiar expression that says, cleanliness is next to godliness. In fact, there are a number of people that would probably think that that expression comes from the Bible itself. Interestingly, even though it sounds like it belongs in Scripture, cleanliness is next to godliness is nowhere found in Scripture. But if it were to be found in Scripture, I believe it would be found in this section that we're reading today, because today we're reading about physical cleanness in order for a person to be considered holy or to be considered godly. It's interesting when we read through this whole account that there is a very close connection between physical cleanness and spiritual cleanness, between physical holiness and spiritual holiness. And so in these laws that are given, we see that there is a very close connection between a person's cleanliness and that person's spiritual self, his or her godliness as well. Now, there is in this section a discussion of several different infectious skin diseases, namely leprosy, but also things like boils, burns, itch, spots, baldness even. And it is up to the priest to determine whether any of these conditions are truly an infectious skin disease. And so there are very detailed instructions about how to go about diagnosing the disease, how to go about quarantining individuals, putting them in isolation to see that they can be cured and to make sure that they are once again clean so that they can be a part of the camp of people once again. It's also interesting that when these are physical ailments, you would expect, at least in our day and age, for people to go to see a doctor. There are no doctors mentioned here in Scripture. The people instead go to a priest, which again confirms the idea that there is a connection between physical health and spiritual health. It is the spiritual leader, the priest, who diagnoses the physical infectious skin disease and takes the proper remedies to help the people correct it. Now, specific rules are given here for those who are diagnosed as having infectious skin diseases. They are to wear torn clothes. Their hair is to be left unkempt. They are to cover the lower part of their face and shout out, unclean, unclean, when they get around any group of people. They are to live alone. They are to stay outside the camp because they are unclean. And only what is clean can be a part of God's clean nation. It's very important that we see all of these distinctions that are being made. Then as we read further, we see that there are problems with mold or with mildew, and how to diagnose if a garment has been infected with mildew, or even if a house has been infected with mold or mildew of some kind, and the treatments that are necessary to get rid of it or to destroy it. The people are to follow the priest's instructions exactly, and they're even warned, interestingly enough, that they must remember Miriam, as if Miriam were the one who didn't obey, who didn't take the priest's guidance seriously enough. That's a fascinating connection there. Then there is instruction given about physical discharges, whether it be a man or a woman, these discharges that make them unclean. There are instructions given about isolation because those who are unclean are to be kept outside the camp. In fact, we read, quote, "Send them outside the camp so that they will not defile their camp where I dwell among them." Those are God's words. The camp cannot be defiled because God dwells in the presence of his people, and he himself is holy. The people were told, "Do just as the Lord instructed Moses with regard to all these things." And God speaks again, and his words are very similar. You must keep the Israelites separate from things that make them unclean, so that they will not die in their uncleanness for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them. Again, we see God's desire to be with his people. But because God is a holy God, he can only be among those who are clean. If they are determined to be unclean, they must be isolated. They must be sent outside the camp until they can be made clean again. Then they are welcomed back into the presence of God and into the presence of this holy people. These are very difficult details to sometimes plod through when we're trying to read. Sometimes we get a little bit bogged down in these kinds of instructions. But again, I want to remind us all, we need to take a step back. We need to see the bigger picture. This is about God. It's about his holiness, his purity, his cleanliness, and his desire for the same among his people. So let me ask you a question as we close today. How important is it for us, still trying to please and serve this same holy God, how important is it for us to make sure that we are pure, to make sure that our lives are lived in a clean way? And even though it's not found in Scripture, there's a lot of truth to that old adage, cleanliness is next to godliness. Isn't it great to be a lamplighter? His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I hope you have a blessed day.